Hey everybody, this is Beelit, and this is the Beelit Podcast Episode 6. It's been a while since the Beelit Podcast. Took a little break from it, and I think I'm just going to have it be a thing that I do every so often, just whenever I have enough to talk about, things that I'm interested enough in to talk about, and no set schedule for the Beelit Podcast. It'll happen when it happens, essentially. So, a few things I wanted to talk about. The Mayweather versus McGregor fight. Netflix Death Note. Ooh, that one's gonna be a fun one. That's gonna be a fun one. And Injustice 2 Fighter Pack 2. I'm actually gonna start off with that Injustice 2 Fighter Pack 2. Oh my goodness, talk about disappointment. The first reveal for it was, we'll say, lackluster. We all pretty much knew two of the characters that were in it. We all knew Raiden, or Raiden, I don't know which way they pronounce them in Mortal Kombat, and Black Manta. We knew those two. The only real reveal was freaking Hellboy. And look, I had really wanted Etrigan to be in there, and so I'm assuming now that the person that we were all thinking was Etrigan, well, some people were thinking that character was Beast Boy, transformed as a gorilla because reasons, I guess. But I had always thought that silhouette was Etrigan, and I thought that would be a good explanation for that silhouette. I thought that was, I was really sure that could be Etrigan, and it could have been, but it just wasn't. Instead, it was freaking Hellboy. And you know, I'm not necessarily going to say that, you know, he's gonna suck. I'm disappointed that it's another guest character, you know. And yes, Hellboy does come from comics, but he's not what we associate with, you know, being a DC Comics character. I'm not even sure what banner he flies under as far as comics go. I'm not sure where his company of origin is. But either way, not really something that I think we really wanted. Interesting that they did it, but just unwanted. I'll move on. I'll move on from that. It's unwanted. That clears it up. That sums everything up. Unwanted. Maybe he'll be fun. Maybe, but just didn't ask for it. And speaking of didn't ask for it, Raiden. He looks awful, by the way. When we all thought there were going to be two guest characters in the game, a lot of people were really concerned. One guest character was Sub-Zero, that was fine. Two, with Raiden, people were concerned about that. They didn't like that. Three now with Hellboy, and I can't fault anyone for being legitimately upset. I really can't. Especially when Raiden looks so freaking awful. His design is atrocious. Now, there is this thing going on where people were talking about Black Lightning and Raiden being swapped out for each other, one of them being a premier skin for the other. And if they revealed that Raiden was simply a premier skin for Black Lightning, which Ed Boon is right now on Twitter teasing Black Lightning. I don't know what it's going to be right now, though. If it comes out that Raiden is a premier skin for Black Lightning, I'll be okay with that. If it comes out that Black Lightning is a premier skin for Raiden, I'm going to be disappointed. I don't really like the character Black Lightning anyway, but at least he has more business being there than Raiden. It feels like there are too many guest characters in a DC fighting game. When there are guest characters in Mortal Kombat, it feels a little bit different, because Mortal Kombat is a little bit different. You know, it's not as defined of a world as DC, and the world that it is defined as isn't as strict about what you can put in there. You know, it is a little bit more fun oriented, the Mortal Kombat universe. DC is really, really well defined. You know, DC doesn't normally do a lot of that kind of stuff, so when you do have some kind of crossover, you don't have the same kind of leniency that you would for a DC universe, or for a Mortal Kombat universe with the DC universe. You essentially only get one. And a lot of people don't like too many things crossing over with the DC universe, because it's just not typical. And you can't fault people for doing that. And all these guest characters, not really all that welcome. I've talked enough now about the guest characters. I think we're all on the same page for the most part. Some people like the characters, and that's totally fine and dandy. But I think we all understand the concern. We all understand where people are coming from in not wanting the guest characters, and I think that the argument has validity to it, whether or not you agree with it. Or whether or not you see it the same way, or you have a problem with it. I think you can at least understand the frustration with it. Now, on to the DC character that was revealed in the Fighter Pack 2, Black Manta. I really wanted Black Manta to be in the game, and I was really excited when I saw the silhouette when they did the big Fighter Pack reveal. So freaking excited. I was really freaking happy, because I really wanted him in the game. Then I saw the gameplay for him, and I'm really disappointed. It just doesn't have the feel that I wanted him to have. I don't like the jetpack thing. I think if he had done a little bit more with the lasers, a little bit more with the harpoon gun, a little bit more with the staff, that I would have been a lot happier. But as it was, he just didn't feel dynamic enough. You know, it just felt like stuff was just happening. He was just doing things, but it didn't feel like it was Black Manta fighting. It just felt like it was a character doing stuff, and he just didn't feel unique enough. Yeah, it just, I don't know. And maybe it was just the gameplay trailer. Maybe just the gameplay trailer didn't do a good job of conveying how he feels and how he plays and all the different things, because essentially all the gameplay trailer was just baby combos, you know, and that is normally what it is. So I'm going to hold out hope that he's not as weird as the trailer made him look, and that there is a little bit of excitement to him. Really disappointed about the jetpack thing. I hate crap like that. It's just really stupid to me. It feels like gimmicky going around on a freaking jetpack like that. It just seems stupid, especially the way it looks. It just looks dumb. But yeah, I was disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. I'm holding out hope that it's not as bad as it looked, but I am not getting my hopes up right now. So those were my thoughts on the Injustice 2 Fighter Pack 2 reveal. Hopefully Fighter Pack 3 is better. I doubt that this is going to happen, but I really want Huntress in the game. Again, seriously doubt that's happening. But for me right now, the only way that they pull this thing out is if I get Huntress, and they're probably going to have to add some more DLC if they want me to be overall satisfied with their DLC lineup for this game, because as it's looking right now, I'm just it does feel a little bit lackluster, the DLC lineup so far. I know a lot of people liked Red Hood, but I didn't particularly like him. A lot of people like Starfire. I didn't particularly like her. Sub-Zero, don't really like him. So you know, for me personally, I've struck out with each of those DLC characters. They just don't do it for me. So hopefully somewhere along the line, there's someone that is actually interesting and brings something that is a little bit more unique and flavorful to the table. But right now, not quite looking like it. So let's go ahead and move on to Mayweather versus McGregor. Now, I normally don't watch fighting. I'm not a big fan of watching that kind of stuff. The biggest thing that I would ever watch were old highlights of Muhammad Ali, and every now and then little snippets of Mike Tyson, just like little highlight reels of Mike Tyson. I'd watch full fights for Muhammad Ali, but no one else. and I'd watch little highlights for Mike Tyson and stuff like that. It was interesting, but I was never really a boxing fan or MMA fan for that matter either. But this one was big, and a lot of people that I work with, they were talking about it, and it was just a very, very big sporting event, so I gave it a shot. I went ahead and I watched it. And the lineup was Mayweather, 40 years old, and McGregor, I think 28 or 29 years old, in his prime. Mayweather was outranged, outpowered, I think, clearly. And the cards were... the experience aspect was definitely stacked in Mayweather's favor because it was a boxing match. It wasn't MMA. McGregor, if this was MMA, McGregor would have wiped the floor with Mayweather. I don't think anybody questions that at all. Mayweather, I'm sure, would be the first one to say that. You know, he's not going to be able to do that. He's 40 years old. He's a boxer. He's not going to be able to win an MMA match with Conor McGregor, who is 29 in his prime and is an MMA fighter. That's what he does. But it's a boxing match. And one of the things that is very, very important to understand is boxing is a sport. It has rules to it. Yes, you'll have people that fight with a boxing style, but it's far closer to a sport than a style of fighting. There are things that you cannot do in boxing, which, if you're in a fight, there is nothing you cannot do. You do whatever it takes. But boxing has a specific rule set, and you can't instantly master a rule set at the snap of your fingers. McGregor is much closer to a fighter than Mayweather is. But that doesn't matter when you're going into boxing. Boxing is a sport. I would never pit a baseball player against a soccer player in a soccer game. A baseball player could be very physically fit, very, very strong. They could know, they could have a very well-built set of skills for sports, for competition, but not for soccer. That's a different set of skills. And if the roles were reversed, I would favor a baseball player over a soccer player in a baseball game. It's a set of rules. It's a set of skills that you have to tune for that specific sport. McGregor didn't have that. Now, he was good. And he was certainly way closer to having good boxing skills than a lot of other people would be. Obviously, he has upper body work because he goes into the MMA, and it's not, reinventing the wheel to come into boxing, but there are limitations on it, and you do have to get used to those limitations. You'll see he was throwing hammer strikes. You can't do that in boxing. That's not allowed. He has the strength for it. He has skill for it, but he doesn't have the fine-tuned understanding of the rules of boxing and what you can do and what you cannot do and how you have to use those tools with the other person's tools. He doesn't have that kind of in-depth experience. Mayweather does, because that's what he's been doing for, 20-something years? He does. He does have it. And so you can't act as though it's an even matchup in that respect. And then, of course, Mayweather's he was 49-0. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous. So yeah, I think no one was really surprised that Mayweather won it. But what was really interesting to me about it was the way Mayweather won it. Initially, McGregor came out with really, really strong attacks. And there was one uppercut very, very early on, maybe even in the first round, that made me think, uh-oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? He might have a shot at this. This might be closer than I expected. And he came out really, really hard in those first 2, 3, possibly even 4 rounds. But eventually, Mayweather slowly kind of turned it up, and was able to wear him out, take him down, counter punch him, and really make everything add up. In the 10th round, I believe it was, McGregor was called down. The ref called it a TKO. And McGregor had said that if he had been given a little bit extra time, he could have come back. I'm somewhat inclined to believe him on that, to a degree. I don't think he would have come back into winning from the position that he was in. I would disagree with that aspect, but I think he had more in him if he did have a little bit of a break, because one of the things that, you know, if you watch the MMA that he does, they go pretty far before they call anything in MMA. I was watching after the fight, or no, it was before the fight, a little highlight from him and I guess I think last name was Diaz, and oh no, yes, because he referenced that fight when he was talking about the fight being called off early, that he could have gotten a second win. He referenced the Diaz fight. They were bloodied all over. And at the end of McGregor's boxing fight with Mayweather, he didn't look all that bad. I mean, sure, his face had taken some hits. You could tell he took a little bit, but it was not like that. And so for me, I can kind of give that a little bit of credit. When he says that, I can understand where he's coming from, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with him that he could have gone a little bit longer when you compare where he was at that moment in the boxing match to what I've seen in just the little highlights for the MMA. But I don't think he would have come back to win it. I think he would have come back for a little bit, but I don't think he would have come back to actually win that match. At that point, it looked like Mayweather was really in full control. He had gotten everything that he wanted. He was starting to throw a heck of a lot more often, and the accuracy was really, really good for the punches that he was throwing. He was definitely in control at that point. And yes, I think McGregor could have, come back a little bit, but I don't think he would have come back and won. But a very, very interesting fight. I know a lot of people that wanted McGregor to win said the fight was fixed. As I mentioned before, I didn't really watch boxing, so I didn't have a favorite. When I saw the 49-0 record, I will honestly admit I wanted it to be broken, and so part of me was kind of rooting for McGregor as the underdog pick, but I didn't expect it to happen. And so for me, I know sometimes depending on who you want to win, you will see different things in the match. I try to come at things as neutral as possible, but I didn't really see anything that made me say, oh yeah, this is fixed. This is definitely fixed. So I'll leave it at that. Leave me some comments telling me what you guys thought of the match if you did watch it. Now, here's our last topic. I'm going to get a quick drink before we go on to this topic because you might be able to tell I've been a little bit sick for a while. My voice is kind of off, so I need to make sure I don't get too dried up here. Alright. Here we go. Netflix Death Note. Okay, so I went on Twitter and I was tweeting as I was watching the movie. I'll put a link to my Twitter in the description. You can kind of look at some of the things I was saying as I was watching it. But I want to kind of go a little bit more into the movie. Now, I liked the series. I liked the Death Note series. It's most likely one of my top 10 anime. This Death Note movie would have been a heck of a lot better. They could have had a heck of a lot more success with it, more freedom, everything. they could have done so much more, so much better, if this had been a sequel instead of a reimagining, instead of an adaptation. If they had decided to make this something that was set after the events of the original series, I don't know how they would have to play it. Maybe they could just say, oh, Light originally happened in, the 80s or something, and then they bring it over to here, the 80s or the 90s, and then they just 20 years later somebody else finds it and just make it a sequel. I think they would have had a lot more success in it than what they did, because they were trying to make it an adaptation and trying to change quite a bit in order to get the story through. I think it ended up hurting them in a few noticeable ways. For instance, the glaring thing throughout the entire movie was its pace was sporadic. And that's something that happens when you've either got too much to do or too little to do. And I think if they had been able to have a little bit more freedom in how many characters they had, what characters they had, if they had just made it a sequel, I think they could have done a lot more with this. But I think because they're trying to make it an adaptation, there were certain things that they wanted to be in there, certain characters that they needed to be in there, certain storylines that they wanted to be in there, and I think because of all of those things, it kind of dragged the story down and dragged a lot of the different characters down, and it could have just been, they made enough changes as it was that it wasn't that difficult to just change the characters to just make them different characters, to just make it a different story. That's my bottom line on the whole Death Note movie. It didn't need to be an adaptation. It would have worked so much better as a sequel. One of the changes, I'm just going to go through some of my bullet points here. The changes in the characters. L was far more emotional, and I don't think that was necessarily bad. I think it would have been better if it wasn't L. I think it would have been a little bit more gripping if it was an original character and not L, for a fan of the series like myself, because for me, I don't want to see L be that emotional. And there's a bit of a contrast between how L starts and how he ends, and I'm not 100% sure if I buy it completely. I think that L was probably the best character in the movie, but I think part of it is just having that idea, that concept of who L was from the series, and so it's very possible that that's kind of shaping my thought process on how this character was portrayed in the movie, and it's kind of making it a little bit harder for me to accept that. But I did accept it to a certain degree. I just felt it was a little bit too much at times, and it would have worked so much better if it was just a different character. You go from having this L character who's eating candy all the time and never sleeping, who's supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and then one death close to him makes him go insane. Well, I mean, not insane necessarily, but makes him go way further than you would expect out of this, ace detective who was born and raised to be the best of the best of the best of the best, who was created more or less as an ultimate kind of force, to then have one death take him over the edge, is just, I just didn't completely buy it. I mentioned the death there, and I'm sorry that's going to be a minor spoiler. But if you watched, I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to keep it as spoiler free as possible. But I did have to mention a death in order to talk about that emotional change. But I'm going to keep it as as low as I can on spoilers, and I'll give you a little bit more notice if I go down spoilery territory. Light has a relationship with a new character who I think was supposed to be the Misa replacement. Her name is Mia, and their relationship was very fast and came out of nowhere. And it's all the premise of Death Note is that Light finds this notebook where he writes the name of anyone in the notebook, and as long as he writes their name and can imagine their face, they will die. There's a lot of murder in it, as you can clearly assume from that premise. And Light and Mia's relationship is like this murder fetish relationship, and it makes no sense. It just freaking happens, and you don't. The way it starts is just so nonsensical. Why in the way it starts was so stupid and so sudden for no reason, and it goes against another part of Light. Light isn't that smart in this universe. He's more of a common sense person than really being smart, and they try to show that he was smart by in the very beginning he is doing other people's homework, but it's all math. Okay, being good at math is not the same as having great deductive reasoning. It's not the same as being able to understand what someone else is going to do and plan around that, and to create plans that are foolproof based off of the actions of other people. Math doesn't give you that. Yes, math does help you in structuring your thought process, and that is why it's taught in schools. It's logical, and it puts you in a step-by-step framework so that you can reason with your thoughts a little bit better. Yes, but it doesn't teach you to think like someone else. And you have to prove that there's a little bit more than just, oh, he's good at math, he must be smart. That is the stupidest kind of leap in logic. And I hate it so much, and it was so really poorly done, and it never really came to fruition. You know, you're just supposed to assume that he's smart for no reason other than, oh, he does math homework for other people. Whatever. He's not that smart, and he makes some really poor decisions. Initially with Mia is one of the biggest, most glaring ones, and we're going to talk about another one fairly soon, and there was absolutely no reason for those mistakes to have been made. Ryuk, cool. Ryuk was fine. It was totally fine. Not much was changed about his character. He felt pretty true to what he was initially done in the anime, and I'm pretty sure the anime was pretty faithful to the manga, so I don't think Ryuk had any real issues for me. Yeah, and those were the biggest changes in the characters that I wanted to talk about. Light, I'll get to him a little bit later. Let's go to the problems. Let's go to just overall problems. My first biggest one is the diner scene. Now, I'm not going to spoil too much about what happens in this diner scene, but I have to say, no reason for this to have happened. And it broke the entire movie at that point, because there was now no more question about things. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to take a brief spoiler break. If you want to maintain it, if you want to hear what I'm going to say and what the spoiler was, I'm trying to think about the significance of it as far as spoilers go. It's honestly, it should be a huge spoiler, but the problem is that it's not. The problem is that in the context of the movie, it's irrelevant, when in the context of the movie, it should have been everything. So, spoiler alert, like 10-15 seconds. Actually, you know what? I'll just put a timestamp in the video. So, yeah, you'll be able to see when to come back. So, here's a spoiler. Light tells Elle that he's Kira in the diner scene. He essentially told him, okay, yes, you didn't explicitly say, I am Kira, but you told him you're Kira. You told him you're Kira. And then Light goes, I don't do check, I only do checkmate. That was checkmate. He dang near told you by saying, well, what if the power was transferable to someone who was a lot worse? You should be working with him and not blah, blah, blah. Who else but Kira would say that? There's literally 0% that anyone else would say that. 0%. And then he asks him, do you know how he does it? Dude, how could anybody, even a freaking 5-year-old, hear that, knowing the context of this, hear him say that and not think that that was Kira? And not, no, sorry, I used the wrong word there. I said not think, not know that that was Kira. And in the way that they ended it, it's clear. Look, Elle, I get it. You want to know how he does it, but you know that it's him now. It doesn't matter anymore how he does it, honestly, because you stopped him. Bam! We're done. You can just torture the crap out of him and eventually figure, hey, he'll break eventually. Keep him alive long enough, he will break eventually. It destroyed the movie for me, honestly. It really did. It ended the movie. At that point, the movie should have been done. Light should have lost. That should have been the end of it. But Eldest decides, nah, that's alright. I'm cool. Absolutely atrocious. I talked about this briefly. Gosh dang it. The diner scene, it's just, I have it written down here in my notes in all caps with like 10,000 exclamation marks. It destroyed the entire movie. Gosh dang it. Anyway, so Mia's initiation, I talked about this a little bit earlier, completely unnecessary from Light's point of view. A huge risk getting her in on this. And there was no reason to have done it. She showed no reason. There's no freaking reason why he did it other than just for the movie. He just did it. Whatever. I mean, I would think that if you came across this thing, that you would want to hide it. You know, especially if, you know, you could see that this thing was real. Why would you just go around and just to random people that you don't really know? I mean, he might think that he knows her. He didn't really know her. They had like one interaction at that point. And whatever. Freaking whatever. The acting in the movie was really, really bad. Particularly by Light. I didn't like his acting at all. And the worst thing for me that stood out, the worst acting, was in Ryuk's reveal. It was comical. He was supposed to be scared, but it was just overacting in my eyes. And it came across as being kind of funny. And I don't know if it was supposed to. I don't think it was supposed to. But as I said on Twitter, I ended up saying that this movie was a comedy because so many things just didn't work as horror. My next point, after the really bad acting, was the death scenes were so freaking exaggerated that they turned funny. There was one decapitation scene, freaking hilarious. And I don't think it was supposed to be, but because everything was so freaking exaggerated, and the guy's freaking face exploded, it came across as funny. But then all the characters are reacting in this horrified way, and it just creates this weird kind of odd situation where you're laughing, but no one else is. Everyone else is horrified, and you're trying to figure out, well, was it okay for me to laugh? Was I bad for laughing? Am I supposed to be laughing that they're horrified right now? What is this? Is this a comedy, or is this an action, or not action? Is this a horror film, or is it something else? Is it mystery? Is it a thriller? What is this movie supposed to be? Because that death scene was funny. I don't know. But there were a lot of moments throughout the whole freaking series, or not series, throughout the whole movie, that just had this weird kind of mismatched tone where you didn't know what they were really going for. Tone just as a whole, pretty freaking off. But now that I've gotten through some of the big bad parts, I do want to talk about some of the good parts. There were a few good parts. The diner scene, even though it was the worst part of the movie, and it was undeniably wrong the way that it was done, there was one good part of the diner scene before it became wrong. And it was that it showed a really good glimpse into Elle's character and motivation. Elle said at some point, he asked what Kira would do in judging himself. And that was something that needed to be said. That was something that needed to be asked. And it brought up a really good point, one that Light was not prepared for. Clearly, he was not prepared for it. Then, Elle also kind of talked about why he did what he did. And he said that he brings people to justice, and that in the form of justice that he brings them to is from their own making. That he is not judging them. That they are judging themselves, but he's just making sure that they are brought to that justice that they created for themselves. He mentioned, to elaborate on this, that Kira was he was flying too close to the sun. So Elle is just there to make sure that he does get burned. And so that's really defining that Elle wants fairness. He wants your actions to come with a consequence, and whatever that consequence is, that's your fault. That's on you because of what you did. He's not the one deciding what that punishment is. He's not the one deciding whether or not you live or die. He's just the one making sure that you do have to pay for your consequences. For him, that's what justice is. This actually reminds me of a really bad part. Light doesn't really know why he's doing all of this. He initially is kind of on more of a revenge train than anything. Also paired with the freaking murder fetish that I was talking about earlier with his relationship. He doesn't really have a clear sense of justice that he defines in the movie. It's really just more about, saying that I'm killing criminals. That's good. And that's about it. He doesn't have the same kind of response to what he's doing. He doesn't have the same kind of how should I say this? He doesn't go that far into what he's doing. He doesn't think about it all that much, it feels. Elle thinks about it. Elle has considered what's happening and what's going on and why he is pursuing Kira. Kira's just kind of doing things, because he can, almost. And that was kind of disappointing. And I think Elle was, in a sense, wasted on Light, because they couldn't have that kind of conversation. And again, if it had just been a sequel, they could have taken Elle out. They could have made, a character that was a little bit more adjusted for where they took Light, and tried to work with that angle a little bit better, instead of having Elle, who actually, was somewhat defined in the movie, and then having Light, who really wasn't defined in the same way. If they had just taken it back, brought some new characters in there, redefined those characters, then I don't think we would have had as big of an issue as far as fans go with how different these characters were. It just doesn't even feel like the same thing. And if you're going to make them that different, just make them different characters and really roll with it. Really reinvent everything. Don't change a character here and then not change the character to compensate, because you're ruining the theme. And it became kind of apparent in that diner scene, that kind of confrontation. While it was great to see L really elaborate on his thought process, there wasn't an equivalent on the other side. And it goes back, L, I think, was one of the best characters, possibly even the best character in the movie, but he was kind of let down by the fact that Light just wasn't up to par with him. They just didn't speak the same language, essentially. There was a scene in the movie, you saw it in the trailer, these people are walking off a giant skyscraper building. That scene was awesome. I freaking loved that scene. It was absolutely amazing. The only thing I would have changed was the music. The music in this movie was, I'm going to say, a poor choice. They went with kind of Blade Runner-y, kind of 80s sci-fi weird kind of synth music, and I didn't feel that it worked. I felt that it was a little bit too different from what was actually on screen, just because I really associated that with the 80s sci-fi kind of stuff, and that's just not what it was. It felt very, very off to me, a lot of the music choice. So for me, it didn't work, and that consistently throughout the movie, the music did not work. But the only bad part about that scene with the people walking off the skyscraper was the music choice. Other than that, the significance of the scene, the way that it came in, the way that it was shot, all of that kind of stuff, I really, really liked that scene. That was a standout scene for me, and that actually kind of pulled me into the movie a little bit more, because up until that point, I was really heading out on the movie. But that scene got me into it, and the ramifications of that scene got me into it a little bit more as well. But of course, it ended up losing me later on. But still, give credit where credit is due. That was a pretty cool scene. And also the ending. The ending worked off of a character change in L, where I don't want to give too much away here, but L is a little bit different in this movie. He changes, as I mentioned, there was a death that really changes him and turns him down a more emotional road, and you actually do kind of question where he is going to go as he's getting far more emotional. And the ending was very, very, very cool for me. I really like that style of ending that they chose, because it allows me to think. And while it would not have worked with the L that was in the original series, it worked with this L because of where they took him. Whether or not you completely bought where he went and why he went there, the fact that he was there was apparent. You knew the mental state that he was in. You knew the emotional state that he was in. You knew it. So whether or not you bought him getting there or not was irrelevant. You know he's there. And so it does make sense for him to go down that path while he is in that state. So it's really hard to talk about that without going into spoilers. I would definitely recommend that you watch the movie. You'll understand what I'm talking about once you do watch the movie. And you can leave a comment, and we'll talk about it in the comment section. You know what? Maybe I'll even just do a spoiler kind of review on it in a different video. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, I've been talking long enough, and I'm still not feeling well. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here. I greatly appreciate you guys for watching. This was episode 6, I believe, of the Be Lit podcast. If there's anything that you'd like me to cover in the next video, make sure you let me know. I've got a few movies that I'm kind of wanting to review, to talk about a little bit. I'm not sure if I talked about Logan yet. Ooh, Logan was a really good one. I really like that one. That's actually, wow, that has actually been a while, hasn't it? Whew. So, I know I haven't talked about Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut. I just got that along, well, actually I didn't just get it. I've had it for a while, but I haven't had the opportunity to watch it. So, if you want to vote on one of those things, I've got Logan, I've got X-Men, Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut. I believe I've already talked about Deadpool. That's a good one, but I do want to do the history of Trunks for Dragon Ball Z. It's been a long time since I saw the movie, and I really kind of wanted to know if it held up. I can't imagine whether or not it's held up just off the top of my head. I know watching it as a kid, I freaking loved it, and I thought it was absolutely freaking amazing. But I was a kid, so I don't know. I used to think a lot of things were freaking amazing when I was a kid, and then I get a little bit older, and you rewatch that episode of the old episodes of the Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and you go, oh my goodness, holy crap, this is some cheese. You know, so it may very well be awful to watch it now, but I want to find out. So let me know what you guys would like to see: X-Men Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut, Logan, or History of Trunks. I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching.